Welcome to episode 2 of the Leading for Value episodes of my podcast. It's my pleasure to have you back today, and we're going to get started right away. I'll share my screen, and we'll start talking about the Model C3, which is the key point for today's session. And let me just sort of give you some ideas about what I'm going to try to accomplish in today's session. I think it's important that we go back in time and take a look from a historical perspective of leadership as it has emerged. It really started in the United States during the Industrial Revolution. And then since then, it's morphed and changed and improved over time and time. So we'll just do that briefly. I'll give you a good overview of the C3 model in chapter 1 of my book, Leading for Value. And then we'll shift gears to show you some of the tools and how you can apply those. And the two that we're going to focus on are best in class and one involving competitive positioning. And as we go along, I will be providing you some examples of my own experiences in my own leadership roles, as well as some of the companies. And I'll remind you that the areas that I worked in for 20 some years consulting were the financial services industry, healthcare, which is my background, and also the oil industry and a company that provided mechanical services for refineries. Very interesting group of people, and they were very, very successful. So let's take a look back. Let me give you a framework from what I want to talk about. Leadership, as I see it, really evolves from three principal areas: authority, and that's designed by your position, your rank in the organization. In the military, that's real easy to see, obviously. In other organizations, it's usually your title, like executive vice president, first vice president, so forth and so on, and hierarchy in the organization. So the higher up you are, the implied impression is that you have greater authority over the roles you're in. And then the second dynamic is responsibility, and I define that in terms of scope. How many different areas of the operational components of your organization are you responsible for? And how do you manage those? And what's the mission and tasks that you're performing? That's critical. And the last one, and I hate to say it, this is the one that I found where the companies that were having trouble from one end to the other, typically we're having more trouble with this term of accountability. And that's it, sort of like at the end of the day, who's going to be looked at and pointed to for whatever happens during that day? The ultimate endpoint. And to what extent do you as a leader in your organization share in that responsibility? It's critical. You're called to task, and you either get the credit or the discredit for it. And after the Industrial Revolution got started, some of the great authors began with a guy named Frederic Taylor, and he came about this piece of leadership from totally new ways of thinking from what had been before. He looked at it from the scientific approach, a more orderly perspective, if you will, and that matched worker to the job, monitoring performance of the individuals in the positions they were in. And then the leader's responsibilities were really accountable for planning and training folks and guiding their organizations to lead for the future. And the workers, basically, from his perspective, they perform. They do the actual work. And that's still pretty much today, but it's changed dramatically because there's all sorts of new perspectives on leadership models and so forth. And we'll talk about some of those along the way in this series. And now there's a series of new models and perspectives and new ways of thinking and interacting effectively as a leader in organizational settings. So, got a homework assignment for you. Think back over your own career and write down from your perspective, who were your favorite leaders that you worked for or reported to, and jot down why they were great. I can tell you one of mine was a gentleman who was the CEO of the hospital. And every time I went in his office, even though I was sort of down in the chain of command, if you will, every time I went in his office, whether he took my advice or not, when I left that office, I felt like I had a meaningful impact on his thinking process and how he worked to a decision that he thought he was comfortable with. And if I influenced it positively, great. If he didn't take my suggestion, that was okay too, because when I walked away, I felt good about what I had provided him. And then later on in life, in my career in that organization, I found myself saying, I need to do the same thing for my people. It's important to give back to them what I had been receiving as a junior individual in the organization. So let's take a look at the model. The C3 model is one that touches all of the components that I think are critical for inspired leadership and excellence. And that is capacity, capability, and confidence. They have been a part of organizations all along. The way I'm framing it is that capacity and capability drive confidence. And when capacity and capability have a very high correlation, as you can see on this R plus, and they're all very high in terms of demands and expectations, as well as rewards and gratefulness as a leader, that translates into a positive driving force on building the confidence of the people in the organization. In the model, you will see as we go along, capacity is about what I can see. Capability is what I believe and I want you to believe, and confidence is what I want you to achieve. This goes back to the artist Degas. And matter of fact, when you get back to that model, he always told people it's not what I can see, it's what I can help you see. And if you think about an artist, that's a very, very interesting perspective. Now, as a leader, you can do the same thing. It's not what I can see, but what I can help you to see. So we have alignment. It's not so much what I believe, but what I can help you believe, because when you believe, you start developing the skill set necessary to achieve what you can, and confidence is all about achieving and producing results. So let's take another look deeper at capacity. In my perspective, capacity represents the untapped organizational potential. And that's the difference between the glass is half empty and the glass is half full. When you think about as a leader and you get your company and the people working with you, regardless, or as my kids used to say, disregardless of the position you're in, if you can help them start thinking about what is the potential we have a glass half full, how do we fill it? How do we look to the future and make it even better than it is today? Secondly, an expendable force with direction. I have found that when there's alignment and a good understanding of our core values and the goals and objectives that we're trying to achieve, you have a much greater opportunity to achieve outstanding results. And that comes from leaders facilitating very productive dialogues about those components on almost a daily basis. And it's about the future desired state. What do we think we can achieve? Now, here's the catch on that one. You don't want that desired state to be an endpoint. It's an intermittent step. So if we get to that point, we're going to step back again and look ahead and say, what else can we look for? What else can we do? So a vision is what wants to be. And that's very, very important. A leader can see and help others to see. That was the key piece. So when you, again, think about it, think back about in your own organization, what is the future? What is that vision? And what are the kinds of results and kinds of questions you might have for yourself? Jot them down and think about it. The second component is capability, and that's the knowledge, skills, and behaviors of the individuals in the organization, and most importantly, the leadership. When you are out of your office, and we'll come back to this at another point, you're being seen by everybody. And what you do and what you say and the kinds of actions you take are the behaviors, the skill sets, and the knowledge that your people will see about you. And the more they see, the deeper they see, the greater the potential of trust that you're going to have with the people you work with. And that's very important. And you probably heard of Peter Senge's book. He emphasizes continuous learning in an environment where every single day or every week we step back and ask ourselves, what did we achieve? What could we have done better? And how do I make sure that I help others in my organization truly believe in what they can do? Because when they do, and I saw it when I was stationed in Washington, D.C. with a group of budget analysts that reported to me, it was amazing what they were able to accomplish. I didn't have to worry about anything. They placed a great deal of value on learning for themselves, for me, and the impact was incredibly positive. Now, the last area, again, is confidence, and that's that ability to achieve. So it's laid out in the strategic planning and action. The goals look both measurable and meaningful impact. Measurable means we put points on the board. We scored victories, and that's important. But it's also important for those goals to be meaningful and how we achieve them, because that's your own self-motivation. That's so when you get home at the end of the day, you feel good about what you've done. And that means, hey, when I get up the next morning, I'm looking forward to going back to work because I'm going to have a great opportunity to do some really wonderful things. And what a leader is tasked to do more than anything else is to help motivate and help others to achieve what they can do. And you can see the comments on the right part of this slide. And the task I have for you is think of an excellent example of the results in your organization and what were the key drivers that made that happen. And how much did your leadership play, either yours or your leaders play in influencing the potential outcome that you achieved. That's the model, and it translates into see, believe, and achieve. And Degas was not what I can see, but what I can help you to see. I add to it, it's not just what I believe, it's what I can help you believe. And again, not what I can achieve, it's what you can achieve. Now we're going to turn to some of the tools that I think are applicable in any industry, in any kind of organization. Although a lot of mine were used in healthcare, financial services, and the oil industry, it just demonstrated that they were very applicable. The first one is an opening dialogue, and this is a great tool for a leader and throughout the organization, especially if you've just changed directions or you've set a new vision and you're implementing new chains of work, lines of work, I mean. And so what I would typically do is try to get the group set up to say, I'm going to guide you. We're going to do some brainstorming and have some exploration of what you're thinking. And then we'll come back to what this means to our organization. And so basically you get a blank sheet of paper. And I started off with, when I say best in class or sustained superior performance, what are those companies or organizations that immediately pop into your head and why? And also you might have to say, by the way, this is the interactive portion of the session we're having today. So just keep it popping up the names. And what I would do is on a sheet of paper, on a board, capture those names of the companies. Just very quickly, get about half dozen, whatever they're looking at. And the more enthusiasm you see, it's the better. So that's step one. Now, once you get a few of them, you say, okay, let's stop for a minute. Think back now. Why is it you think of those companies over other companies, their competitors, for example. And you'll hear people say, well, it's the quality of the product. Oh, customer service. The product's consistently outstanding. They're very innovative. They come up with new ideas and new products all the time. Though they have aggressive pricing, you know, the brand name just signals everything, to name a few. And the importance of that is for them to start thinking again, not just about those organizations, but their own organization. And you might ask them, what kinds of things or characteristics of our organization, where do we fit? Do we measure up with our competitors? Do we exceed their expectations? Okay, and then you move forward. The next step is, let's think about over time how some organizations succeed, some fail. And we all go through these patterns of performance up and down. All you have to do is watch the news every night, and you'll hear at the end of a quarter or at the end of 6 months or a year how organizations did and what threats they faced, and so forth and so on. And the fundamental reality is that organizations succeed because their leaders understand how their organizations operate in cycles and how to overcome those obstacles when things are down. And if you can't, you fail. And that's why a lot of organizations, even today, in today's environment, we're seeing that all the time. And so what that gets us to is the next tool, which I would refer to as competitive positioning. By the way, the model that I use comes from a book entitled The Discipline of Market Leaders by Fred Worsema and Michael Tracy. It's a great book. It's not a hard read, but it really provides you with a lot of great thinking about what their premise is, that there are three ways in which you compete. And it's, again, as my kids say, disregardless of the industry. Product leadership, that's new best first. That means that we're constantly coming up with new ideas and transforming those into marketable products or marketable services. In healthcare, it's using now technology in very innovative ways, like one of my colleagues whose organization is Healthcare Futurists. He's redesigning the delivery of primary care in Germany in the remote areas, the non-urban areas, the rural areas, using AI in many, many respects. And it's great. That's what I think his competitive advantage is. The second one is operational excellence. That's high value, low cost. Now, years ago, when I would do this, I would get things like Southwest Airlines. Probably not today, given what's happened with the airline industry recently. But more importantly, other things like Costco, Sam's Club, the big box providers. And they provide high value, low cost. And that's how they compete. And they know that. And they're always doing something to try to extend that competition. And the last one is customer intimacy. And that has to do with meeting or exceeding expectations. And years ago, I had the great privilege of meeting and having a chance to talk with the then CEO of Ritz-Carlton. And Ritz-Carlton was one of those organizations that would pop up. Now, in this case, that's the model. And so I'm going to walk through very quickly. There's three steps in particular that you can use, and you can read this for yourself. And the key here is to try to get an opening dialogue with the group you're working with, to be willing to ask questions and to challenge comments that are made, recommendations, and any examples they can think of and why those companies or organizations. And then the third step, as you see here, is where are we? Do we have a competitive advantage, a characteristic that when someone says the name of our company, it brings up immediately, oh, yes, they're good for, or they're great for X, Y, and Z. So you want to have time for a lot of interesting dialogue because you want to find out what are we doing well, what could we do better, and where are we right now? And the key here is giving people an opportunity, and as you as a leader, to listen and learn about what is it we're doing that we could do better. Very important. Let me close with a couple of quick comments. I've used those tools in every context on the speaker circuit, in my own consulting practice, and when I was a leader in an organization. Those tools work. I guarantee it. And if you have any questions, write them down, think about them, and then think about how you can work through those for the benefit of your own people and the company you work with. Remember, this is about trying to create inspired leadership. In an organization, when you do that, it can't go wrong. I know, I've seen it in all different kinds of atmospheres. And I look forward to seeing you the next time in episode 3. Thank you very much.